Is that showing the whole page?
It's not showing it quite as it would display on my screen normally, no.
I'll just try it again because I can see it. There's a square on it for some reason. What about now?
Yeah, yep, that'll do.
Okay.
Okay, good. Something keeps bouncing back. Are you touching my controls?
You don't have controls, that's me.
That's you. Go back to the beginning. So yeah, I was just asked to have a look at the EV charging network and how it's developed over the last 5 years and how it might look going forward. Next, please, Christopher. So just a bit of context. This is how I see public charging or charging away from home. That most charging occurs at home or fleet-based if it's a fleet car, or a combination if you're traveling while away. And in my view, that will account for between 90 and 98% of all electric vehicle charging for the average user. There will be exceptions with taxis and some delivery vehicles, but that would certainly be what the average person is likely to see. But nonetheless, when the trip length exceeds your EV's battery range, you need a charge network. And most people will need that sometimes. A few people won't. Destination chargers, that's basically the slow AC stuff, say under 25 kilowatts, can provide a useful top-up, but only if you're really charging for an hour or more. Much less than that, you're only going to get 3 or 4 kilometers out of it. Highway chargers, so it's the DC fast chargers, really are designed to charge on demand as soon as possible when you get there. And that's really the way we extend our range for longer journeys. They're never going to be quite as fast as in terms of kilometers per minute of fueling as petrol, but my view is they don't need to be. Next, please. So looking back, when we started 5 years ago, I bought my Nissan Leaf in 2014. One of the questions was there anywhere to charge it? Oh, yes, at the Nissan dealers. Okay, that's handy. It's 5 kilometers from where I live. I won't have run out by then. I can charge at home. And so in January 2015, there was one charger in Tasmania that I was aware of, and that was a charge point in North Hobart. We formed the branch in July that year. And of course, everybody knew, including me when I bought the car, there's lots of power points. We just need to get hold of them. So AVA members enthusiastically started going around recruiting what we call opportunistic charging sites. Basically, there's a power point, it's outside, it's near a parking space. Can we use it, please? And putting them on PlugShare. By 18th of November that year, we had the first actual real public charger that had a Tesla charger and a 3-phase AC socket charger alongside. And we took the opportunity to give it a bit of a boost and a launch. And AVA members, including myself, have been regular visitors to Anvers Chocolate, probably far more than we would have in the absence of that. So good on Anvers. Whether they've paid for the charge yet or not, I'm not sure. On the 27th of November 2015, we formed the Electric Highway Working Group with the idea of planning what would a charge network in the state look like. It included TAS networks, Hydro, the RACT, and representatives from the 3 regional development authorities for local government, as well as AVA, being myself, to try and think through how might this charge network look and how might it evolve. Next, please. And the early concept that we came up with was something like this. We knew that fast chargers were expensive. We also, at the time, were very much faced with things like the iMEV and the early generation Leaf, whose practical range was really 100 kilometers or so, not much more. In fact, less than that if you're going uphill into the wind. So we were looking at, well, we can't afford to put fast chargers everywhere we like. Let's put 4 out there, which will at least allow Teslas to zoom around the state. One in Hobart, one in Campbelltown, one in Devonport, and one on the west coast of Queenstown. And lots of 25 kilowatt DC chargers in between. That's the blue dots, about 25 of them. Roughly figured it would cost about 1.2 million. And that seemed to make sense at the time. Next, please. So early that 2016, I took a tour of a bunch of European charge networks. I happened to be in the Northern Hemisphere and one thing and another, so I took advantage of it. And that was a real eye-opener. Changed the view of things in many ways. When I came back, we had a meeting and started to rethink the plan, and that led to doing tours of Tasmanian sites and site evaluations, particularly looking at local government areas and potential local government sites. During the year, we had about 4 meetings, came up with a revised plan. And at that time, our thinking was, hey, look, there's not a lot of vehicles in the market. The announcements of vehicles coming to the market were a bit sluggish at that point. And we figured that 2018 would be a good year to start building this thing seriously. November that year, Ava, we'd been out there knocking on doors, talking to lots of host sites and opportunistic charging, as I said. And we decided to support that with a blue sign, which was adopted nationally. And we did some brochures too for tourism operators, caravan parks and the like, and continued knocking on doors. And by the end of the year, we had 40 sites on PlugShare. So that's up from 1 2 years before, which wasn't a bad go. Next, please. So the revised plan, what did it look like? Well, one of the things we learned was that although the existing Leaf and IMEV and so forth had short range, that was not going to be the norm reasonably soon. The next generation of cars would certainly have 150 plus, probably more likely 200 plus kilometers range. So that the idea of having lots and lots of chargers of low power close together probably doesn't make sense. The other thing I learned from the European tour was people who have those cars don't go on long trips in them, because you drive for an hour and you charge for 40 minutes, and you drive for an hour and you charge for 40 minutes. It really doesn't make sense. If you buy a short range car, chances are you're using it in a city and you rarely go on those longer trips. So we came up with a plan that said, look, the Midlands Highway is 90% of the traffic in Tassie. We really need to do that and do that first, and that could be profitable. Not right away, but in a reasonable sort of time frame that an investor might consider. The East and West Coast will not be, and so they need a subsidy. So we made this distinction between the pink dots on that map, which we thought were the backbone of the initial network, and the yellow dots or orange dots, which we said they'll only happen when some form of government support is there to assist them. The other thing we learned from Europe was that the chargers are where the traffic is, and there were more in urban areas than we ever thought there would be. And I expect that that will be the case here too. And it will be some taxis and delivery vans, but it'll also be just people moving around. Oh, I forgot to charge last night. I need to top up. Where's the charger? Okay, they're going to look for one in their urban area. And so we expect those blue dots will evolve over time, but they're more convenience than necessity if you've got the red ones there already. And destination charge will still play a role, whether they're 25 kilowatt DC or whether they're AC charges. Those black dots will pop up here, there, and everywhere. That's just a sample, no particular priorities. Don't pay attention to the black dots. Next one, please. So 2017, that was a good year. The Electric Highway Tasmania was formed in order to respond to a grant announcement. There was a scheme called the Community Infrastructure Grants. It wasn't in any way specific to electric vehicles or anything vaguely related to electric vehicles. It was probably pitched at sports grounds and local parks and bicycle tracks maybe, and things like that. We did, however, we're encouraged to put in a submission because we did fit the guidelines. It was a dollar matching thing, so if we wanted $1, we had to raise $1. And we were looking for that roughly 1.1 million. So we raised 550,000 and sought an equivalent matching grant from the government. We didn't get it. But by that time we'd formed a business, and there were 7 investors initially, or 8. We thought, well, we got the money, or at least we've committed the money. Let's go do what we can with that. We'd also had the understanding that the Hobart to Burnie route was likely to be cost effective first. So let's start with that. If we haven't got a grant, then let's do that anyway. And so off we went and tried negotiating with the sites on that route. Later that year, Tas Networks announced their fast charger support scheme, which was basically 50% of the cost of upgrading power supplies, where that was necessary, the network part of it. So that was a boost, and that applied to that Midlands Highway route. And then, of course, EV Fest that year. And so the push for chargers to get more sites on the PlugShare map in order to accommodate our visitors from interstate, we reached about 75 sites by the end of the year. And I might note that was the year that the Tesla destination charges started to appear in more significant numbers. There'd been one there from Anvers from earlier, but we started to see more of them coming out, and that's become an increasing part of the scene. Next, please. 2018, things started to move a bit faster. Fast Cities, now renamed EV Networks, announced their national network, and they said there will be 3 sites in Tasmania. Didn't say where they were at that point, or at least they were blurry circles. We got Bernie put out a request for expressions of interest in response to our prodding for a fast charger, to which Electric Highway Tasmania responded. And earlier in the year, somewhere around about March, April, the city of Launceston decided they would do their own thing. So although we've been prodding and talking about what can we do with you, how can we do it, they said, we can do this, we'll do it ourselves. And they duly installed and opened the first DC fast charger in October 2018, around the time of our try and drive day up in the north of the state. And there's Ray standing next to it. By the end of the year, there were about 95 sites on PlugShare statewide, of which about 20 were Tesla. So much of the growth that year, in fact, were Tesla destination chargers. I mentioned that not because I'm particularly a Tesla fan, but to say Tesla have been a significant part of our growth in EV charge networks. Next, please, Chris. So by the end of 2018, out of that map that the working group had developed, we got 1 bullseye, 1 circle on the map in Launceston. Next, please. 2019. So this was, again, another big move. The Climate Change Office announced, first of all, the destination chargers grants. That was really AC chargers for fleets, employers, a few others, quite a few strings to that. Not really meant as public chargers as such, but nonetheless, it gave things a nudge along. Quite a few of them were council ones, supposedly installed for fleets, but many councils will let people use them. There was a round 2 of that as well for destination chargers. Around April, the Climate Change Office put out $450,000 for fast charge grant scheme. And I might note that it wasn't supposed to be $450,000. I'm not sure if this is a political secret anymore, so I don't mind saying it, but it was a typo. They included the total for the destination chargers plus the fast chargers plus some other programs they had, and took the total of 450 and put it in the line for the fast chargers, and it got passed in legislation. So Bob's your uncle. We got an extra 200,000 out of it, or 200, 250, whatever it was. It was certainly more than they intended, but it was great. In May, ChargeFox announced their national network, which also said we will have stations in Tasmania. And sold it up to the middle. I beg your pardon. So ChargeFox announced their national network, and so that was adding to the Mood. And Mood Food in Kempton decided they were going to open it. Bennett's Petroleum had been kicking around for about 2 years, and they finally decided to act. They put theirs in before the grant, so they didn't get a grant for that. So we had 2 chargers up with no grants. And then in June also, the Climate Change Office announced the successful people for the fast chargers, and there were 12 sites, of which Electric Highway Tasmania got 5. In December, the first of those subsidized TCCO sites opened, and that's the one. So the bolt there is the Kempton charger, for those of you who don't recognize it. And then the bottom picture is the site at Scottsdale. PlugShare reached about 110 sites and about 30 Tesla chargers. And again, if you look at the math, a significant part of those additional sites were Tesla chargers. Next, please. So by the end of 2019, we got 3 bullseyes on the map. That's not much yet, but it's getting there. Next, please. Here we are in 2020. Well, all those grants are supposed to have been in place by the end of June. Well, one of them was. 2 of them were, beg your pardon. No, one of them was, because the ChargeFox one is in Kings Meadow, didn't get a grant. That was not a grant one. It's the Mood Food one. So out of 12 sites, 1 of them got up in time for the deadline. Yes, we can blame COVID for some of it. We can talk about who was slow and who took a lot of time. And I don't know, how many of you have heard of Hofstadter's Law? Hofstadter's Law says that everything takes much longer than you would think, even in accounting for the fact that you've taken Hofstadter's Law into account. And that's the experience. Everything just takes longer than you think. But it's happening. At the moment, we've got 5 sites under construction. Geeston, we're waiting for a switchboard. I say we, Huon Valley Council. Derwent Bridge, that's the top picture on the right. The concrete's laid, the cable conduits are in. The chargers go in next week. or the DC charger goes in next week. Queenstown, dirt's being dug next week. Hobart, charger went in, that's the bottom right, this week. It's not commissioned yet. Campbelltown's under construction, and that's a 350 kilowatt station. So two of those are the so-called ultra-fast chargers, the tritium 350 kilowatt jobs, paired. So a bit of oomph in those. And then we've got 4 more which are programmed for this year and will be completed this year in all likelihood, probably well before the end of the year. So we will indeed see, next slide please, a lot more bullseyes on the map by the end of 2020. So you can see that we've not only covered the Midlands Highway, we've covered part of it with 350 kilowatt chargers, and we've not only covered the east and west coast, we've got more there than originally had been suggested. So it's looking good. Geeveston wasn't on the original working group map, neither was New Norfolk particularly. And so we're starting to look like reasonably good coverage. But if you look at that, there's still a few gaps. So let's move forward to what happens next. So looking forward, we expect to see fast chargers at a few other sites. Smithton has been under discussion for a long time, but council's been awfully slow. They've had some other things to deal with. Brighton and Westbury have both been announced by EV. They haven't put dates to it, so I say 2021 plus. I would anticipate that one of those sites will occur next year, maybe both. There's also additional possible sites. If you look at the map, there's a few gaps. I'd like to see something at Miena, something at Tulla. Dunalley would really help visitors to the Tasman Peninsula not have to track back to Hobart to recharge or scrape out the distance to Swansea. Ouse will make it easier for some of the shorter range vehicles going uphill in the winter to Derwent Bridge. Georgetown could be an option at the bottom of the Tamar Valley. Some people have suggested Oatlands. None of those are certain. There's speculation. They may start off with 25 kilowatt sites. The government might have a fit of enthusiasm and put out another round of grants, in which case some of those sites might go for 50 kilowatts. Longer term sites, well, those blue dots that we showed, we expect to see more sites appearing in the suburban areas of Hobart, Launceston, and indeed along the northwest coast. So filling in perhaps Ulverston and Wynyard and places like that. But they'll only occur when the volume of traffic and EVs on the road increases. Next, please. And if that happens, then the map could look like that. But that's getting speculative and the timing is going to be hard to pick. Next, please. So some facts and figures. So based on Electric Highway Tasmania's calculations, we expect with typical average use, it takes about 250 to 500 EVs to make one 50 kilowatt charger financially viable. We got about 300 in the state at the moment. So we can't really support that network. At the end of 2021, there may be 8 350 kilowatt DC chargers, between 13 and 17 50 kilowatt DC chargers, and maybe a handful of 25s. To support that network, to make it financially viable, to actually pay the bills and replace the equipment when it wears out and things like that, will take between 10,000 and 20,000 EVs on the road in Tasmania. So anybody who thinks we're getting rich or ripping people off, ponder that for a bit. We might see that happen by about 2027. In fact, what will happen is a few chargers will get busy earlier than that, and others will still be wondering where the traffic is even after that. But that's the sort of numbers we're looking at for the network in the state. Of course, they may not all be Tasmanian EVs. They could be interstate visitors, and we do expect to attract a swag of those. And a lot of them may be rental cars. Next, please. Some of the things that we expect to see, well, Tritium announced it, and we're going to see it pretty quick. That's plug and play, where you don't need an RFID card or an app or a credit card. You just plug your car in and walk away. Wow, Tesla's been doing that ever since they opened up. So it's not exactly novel, but it is coming to the rest of the charger fleet. It does depend upon the charger being enabled, the car being enabled, and the billing system being enabled. All three players have to play, talk to each other, and cooperate. So it won't just happen instantly, and the slow part will probably be the cars. My predictions, in spite of those numbers that I just showed you, I actually think we'll find around about 2024, there will be a race to keep up with demand at selected sites. We'll start to see sites getting busy. and people will start complaining about queuing, and it'll be a case of you put in another charger and then it gets busy real fast, and you put another one in, and my goodness gracious me. So sometime in the second half of this decade coming, we expect to see the issue not being a lack of demand, but how do we keep up? Our thinking certainly is that we're looking at up to six to eight, but typically 8 chargers at existing sites rather than a lot more sites. There's a lot of reasons for that, economic and user benefits. And we have planned our sites for expansion. Not all of them will get that big anytime soon. We expect charging rates to probably come in around 100 to 150 kilowatts as common. Higher power will exist, but relatively few vehicles will be able to do it, and the number of people that offer it and places it's offered will be limited as well. That prediction is constrained, if you will, by if we get higher power 800 volt EV architecture, we may see more higher power chargers, because it's the current in the charge cables that's the limiting factor. Chargeable cars we expect to become rare. They've more or less announced, Nissan and Mitsubishi have announced that in Europe and North America they're going to CCS2 or CCS, and we expect that may well rub off in Australia within a year or two. And we expect to see wireless charging, but only at taxi ranks and places like that, not for the general public. Next, please. Those are my opinions, by the way. You can argue with me. Destination charges, I think we're having a big push this year on tourist accommodation. Basically, we'll be saying, hey guys, the network's there, but people want to charge overnight at your accommodation. That is the place to do it. It makes more economic sense. You can make money by offering that to your guests. And we're going to be rolling that out in cooperation with the state government, Tourism Tasmania, State Development, Climate Change Office, RACT, Tas Networks, and Hydro, and our AVA will all be pushing that forward starting in October. And we hope to get a couple of hundred accommodation places in the next couple of years. And it will be, we hope, normalized so that everybody will think, oh yes, you've got to do that, even if it's just a PowerPoint, because that can charge a lot of cars overnight or give them enough. And we think that should be normal by 2023, 24. And when it is, EV rentals will become common. Decreasing emphasis on public AC chargers. Basically, the overseas experience says if you've got the choice of a DC charger or an AC charger, people will take the DC even if they pay more. The exception being suburbs without private off-street parking. We will see overnight AC charging for them. Free public charging, I think, will become uncommon, just as we're finding more and more shopping centers charge for parking. You will find that giving away free charging won't necessarily stack up economically for many of them. I think we'll see a lot more low power DC, 15 to 25 kilowatt, particularly for fleets, particularly for delivery vehicles and things like that. And I think we will see vehicle to X or vehicle to grid, vehicle to home, but I think relatively limited scope in the public realm. I think there's a place for it, but getting all the bits to fit won't be easy. And so I don't think it'll be massive. Next, please. What's a mature system look like? Well, there'll never be as many public fast charge stations as there are petrol stations, or as many connectors as there are Bowsers, whichever way you want to look at it. As I said early on, public charging probably, I think, even 2% to 10% of energy needs. A destination charge would maybe account for about half that. Public fast charging, the other half. The exceptions, taxis and fleet vehicles, particularly delivery vehicles. Already said over 500 EVs per fast charger bay, typically. But we do see overseas the pattern very strongly. Fast food places, if they decide to start offering charging, that will catch on and I think become significant. And I think that's it. That's it.
Pretty good.
Questions, thoughts, comments, disputes?
I've got a question, Clive. The map with the charges, particularly destination charges, I saw a black dot somewhere where Strathgordon would be, or Lake Pedder. Has anybody approached the guys?
No,
down there?
they're nice to haves. There's no science, no logic, no reality to any of those, John.
Okay.
Just
well,
kind of where would I sprinkle them if I had some pixie dust? That's all.
Oh, okay. Well, it's just I've got a symmetry thing. It'd look nice if there was one at Lake Pedder as well. Then it sort of covers all the state. So.
Yeah, sure. No, get out there and knock on doors. We still have some blue signs in the garage downstairs here.
Okay.
There's lots of people selling chargers these days. Tesla's still giving them away. We just need people to go knock on doors and say, how about that? And we'll pick up a lot of that, I think, with the tourism operator promotion that's coming up in October. Whether they'll pop up in all the places you'd like them to, we'll see.
Well, at the moment, my Tesla's got square wheels because of the COVID thing, so I might get on the hunt and go out there and knock on doors. Like I said, this is a good idea.
Sure enough.
Clive, I'm actually heading down to PETA on Sunday, so I might mention that campaign's coming up in October. Just on another issue, the vehicle V2X or vehicle to grid stuff, the CHAdeMO chargers seem to be the only ones that can notionally do that at present. Any ideas on how long it will take for CCS or whatever it is to come to that?
Tim, it has been done with CCS and it has been done with AC chargers, which was kind of bamboozled me a little bit, but it's been done. That doesn't mean to say it's not commercial, it's not on the shelf, cars aren't enabled for it. So there's all sorts of things that have to happen before it's going to get out there. We still don't have, last I checked, a vehicle to X charger that's approved for sale in Australia. So even if you wanted to put in tomorrow and you got a CHAdeMO car, I mean, my Leaf sitting in the garage is vehicle to X enabled, but I can't buy a piece of hardware to plug it into. So it's theoretical at the moment.
I
was just going to say that for a CCS to vehicle to grid, the Charin consortium that look after CCS have a roadmap that by 2025 they're going to work through vehicle to home or V1X, then V2 home, vehicle to home by about 2022 or 3, and then vehicle to grid by 2025. They actually have a roadmap laid out, but it's to do with the standards and getting everybody to agree to be able to do it.
Yeah, so there's technical issues, but they're resolvable. It's much more about regulation standards and agreement by industrial players.
Yeah, their roadmap actually seemed to list that it was mainly the ISO standards and trying to get everybody around at the same table to agree on the communication standards and the security protocols. Because in theory, some cyber hacker could, if they wanted to, if there wasn't proper security, turn on everybody's cars at the same moment and bring a grid down.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if anything comes out of Tesla's Battery Day on, I think for us it's the 23rd of September too.
Yeah, sure.
They did their Powerwall business, but maybe something will happen there too.
Laura Jones isn't with us tonight, but she's working on an ANU project on Vehicle UX. ANU is obviously Canberra-based, but she's going to be working out of Hobart. I haven't had an update yet. I'm having coffee tomorrow morning. We'll find out where that's at.
Sounds good.
Should be a good one to do a presentation sometime, I reckon.
Yeah, I'll suggest that to Laura.
Okay, any further questions for Clive?
Anyone want to argue with my predictions?
Pretty good.
You don't have to argue, we just store the PDF and bring it up now.
I was going to say, I don't think anyone's going to do that, Clive.
Oh yeah, well, we'll see what happens. Okay, I'll be interested to see how accurate they are too. You know, they're guesses.
We'll find out in 5 years when we do this again.
Oh, our 10th anniversary.
Yes.
All right,
Okay.
I guess we move the program along, eh?
Thank you, Clive. Now, next on the list, we don't have Charles. Charles has pulled out and decided that he can't do his presentation after all, which is probably...
Forward to it, Charles.
Yeah, it was a review of the presentation I gave in 2017 about the trends in electric vehicles, and I was going to do a sort of a before and after for every category and what happened and what didn't happen, and it just was becoming longer and longer. So I think I'll do it on a separate night.